All right, let's talk about the playoff picture and kind of where we're at right now with every single team. So what you see on the screen, that is my prediction for where every single game is going to go down the stretch. It's just a prediction. It might change tomorrow. I don't know. Just what I threw in this morning when I was going through this, and now we're going to just enter it through, see where this would make which teams end up. But also what we're going to do here with that is once we figure that out, we can kind of go through it and just see what each team has to do to get in and kind of all the playoff scenarios and stuff. That's kind of the main thing we take away from this video. So let's just get into it, and let's start off with the AFC. So what you see on the screen is the seedings, and it's, you know, the interesting thing worth noting is that I do have currently the Chiefs projected in my estimation to get the #1 seed, but it is very much up in the air. I have the Cincinnati Bengals beating Buffalo next week, but if that goes the other way and Buffalo does win, they would get the 1 seed. For the Bengals, what they would need is to, you know, win that game against the Bills, and then they would just need some help. They would need a Chiefs loss down the stretch, and then they would get the 1 seed. So that's totally, you know, every team has a chance to win it. The difficulty for the Bengals, though, would really be probably more than beating the Bills even, would be relying on a Chiefs loss. They play Denver and then they play Las Vegas. Seems unlikely, but crazier things have happened. So any one of those 3 teams could make it. I do have Jacksonville making it, but again, with that situation, it entirely comes down to the Titans versus the Jaguars in Week 18. Week 17 does not matter for either of those 2 teams. And then the 3 AFC teams that I still have making the playoffs, still have Miami, Baltimore, and Los Angeles being the 3 teams. Worth noting, I'm recording this before the Monday night game that happens tonight, so maybe the Chargers will lose that, and that could change things. But I think I would still have them, and even with a loss there, if everything else that I think would happen still holds, they would still be in the playoffs. They would just be the 6th seed. Going over to this graph now, this is every team in the AFC and what their projection is in terms of record, also what their current record is. The ones in bold are the ones that would make the playoffs, plus Miami. That would be the 7th team that I would have making it. But there's other teams that do have a chance. So the Jets are here. I went back and forth on if the Jets should win against the Seahawks next week or not. I said, okay, let's just throw it out there as a win. If they do win, then they still are not quite in, but they would have a much better chance. What they would need is to just win on Week 18 as well, and they would get in. So I have them in a scenario where if they win out, I think that they do get in. In fact, I'm almost certain that if they went out, that they would end up getting in this scenario. I think there still is a chance that if they went out, they could miss out in this situation if the Patriots also went out. But again, it seems very unlikely. Reality is, if they went out, they're probably going to get in here. However, are they going to do that? I don't know. That's why I have them just missing out. Same thing with the Patriots. They could get in. They need to win out and some help. So it's going to be tough for them. But there still is a chance that it could happen. You know, going over to the AFC West, that's kind of, you know, a given at this point. Chargers, very easy schedule. So is it possible that they could lose a couple games that they shouldn't? Sure. But actually, in this scenario, the only way that they would miss is if they lose all 3 games. And in fact, if they just lost all the 3 games that they still have on their schedule and everything else held, that would still get them in with a sub 500 record. And, you know, they're not going to lose every game they have on the schedule, I don't think. I think they're getting in. So unless another team gets hot and they, you know, lose a couple games they shouldn't, seems like almost a lock that they will be into playoffs. Going over to the AFC North, you know, Pittsburgh is still technically alive here. However, for them to get in, they're going to need a lot of help here. They have to win out, and even if they win out, it still seems very unlikely. That I think they need another Dolphins loss in here. They need the Jets to lose a couple as well to get in. That seems like the easiest way that they can get in. So seems like they're in a tough spot. I still think the Baltimore Ravens do end up winning this game and getting into the playoffs. And then Cleveland cannot get in. They have no eligible pathway there. As for the AFC South, as I talked about, you know, pretty cut and dry. Jacksonville and Tennessee both have the same record currently, and both would get the tiebreaker with a win Week 18. So this week does not matter. Both teams could rest the starters if they want to. The only reason it would matter would be in the event of a tie Week 18, which, you know, there's something there, but feels like it's a very small chance of happening. And, you know, if I'm Tennessee, I'm certainly resting the starters given how banged up they are. Maybe Jacksonville wants to keep it rolling because they've been playing well, keep the chemistry going. I could see the logic on both, but I think the reality is you're playing for next week if you're Jacksonville and if you're Tennessee. Heading over to the NFC now at this point, it's worth mentioning one slight mistake is that I had the Giants as 8-1, but that is a mistake. I accidentally got one of the games wrong, so they would be 9-7-1. Doesn't change their seedings or anything, but just worth noting. At the 1 seed, you see the Eagles are there as they have been all season, and I think will continue to be there all season. I believe that, one more win and they get in. I think that's going to happen. I think the Eagles are, they lost without Jalen Hurts, but they still came very close against a very good Dallas team. Eagles are very good. 2 seed and 3 seed is totally up in the air. The Niners could jump the Vikings. They only have to make up 1 game. The Vikings lose 1 more game, then that would be enough to flip those 2 seedings. So, hey, it matters a little bit, maybe not for week 1 of the wild card round, right? Playing Washington or playing the Giants. I don't know if there's really a big jump either way between those 2 teams, but at least for the following week, you would get home field advantage, which could matter. As for the 4 seed, I have Tampa Bay still making it, but it really is going to come down to next week against the Panthers, a game I'll actually be at, interestingly enough. So that should be an important game between those 2 clubs, and maybe I'll get more into that when we get to the full chart. As for the wildcard teams, I have Dallas as the 5 seed. Dallas is locked into the 5 seed. They're going to be the 5 seed. So seems like, all year long, it's felt like Tampa Bay versus Dallas in that spot could be a very plausible first round, but hey, who knows what's going to happen. I do have the Giants in Washington making it in, but let's look at the whole chart. So this is the whole chart, and yes, I have every NFC East team making it in. Again, Giants are actually a little bit better than the record says, but those would be the teams that would make it in. But let's talk about the teams that have a real chance to find a way to make it in if something can just flip the other way. So, I brought up Seattle and the Jets, kind of back and forth, which team of those 2 teams could make it in. If everything else, or which two team of those teams, will win next week, and also who can make it in. If everything else holds and Seattle wins that game upcoming, they would actually be the team that is the 7 seed in this scenario. They would surpass Washington. So that's possible. That is definitely a legitimate plausibility, and they could get in. The NFC North is also very fascinating with how about the Green Bay Packers coming out of nowhere to have a legitimate chance to win this. And I actually have the Packers as a team. I have them beating the Lions in week 18 at this point. I do. I think that the way these 2 teams have kind of gone, I kind of trust Green Bay a little bit more at this point. But it could go either way. Also worth noting, if the Packers just win against the Vikings next week and then everything else holds, they would be the 7 seed. Even if Seattle wins, they would be the 7 seed in that scenario. The only way they wouldn't would be if they lose week 18, then obviously, they still need to win out to get in. But if they do win out, it seems like there's a very good possibility that that's all they would need to do. It seems like that would get them in. So you control your own destiny to some degree. There still is a way they could get knocked out, I believe. But, definitely a chance here. I think one of the concerns potentially would be Washington. I had them losing to Dallas week 18, but if Dallas is locked into the 5 seed at that point, then maybe they rest their starters. That could be a concern, as then maybe Washington wins that game, and then if Green Bay wins out and everything else holds, they still don't make the playoffs. So that's a concern, but, it's possible. Also worth noting for the Lions, even though I'm talking about this, they're another team where they just need to flip 1 game. If they win week 18 and everything else holds, they get into the playoffs. So the Lions, the Packers, the Seattle Seahawks, all are teams that I don't have in the playoffs, but have very easy ways to just flip it and get into the playoffs. So between those 3 teams and Washington, it could go either way. I feel pretty solid the Giants will get in this scenario. It's not a guarantee with them either, but I feel pretty okay about them getting in. As I said, even if they drop another game, they would still get in. And I only have them going 1-1 in the next situation. So even if they go 0-2, that puts them at 8-1, which I think still gets them in the NFC here. So I feel pretty okay about them getting in. If they just flip 1 game, if they just win 1 game, which they should beat the Colts next week, they're probably getting in. And then finally, the NFC South, kind of teased it earlier. Again, it really does come down to, in this situation, what happens with Carolina and Tampa Bay next week. That's kind of that's the big question mark. it's between those two teams, which one is going to win next week. Tampa Bay currently has a game lead already, so if they win, well, then they're ahead of Carolina, and the Saints would not hold a tiebreaker over Tampa Bay. So Tampa Bay clinches the playoffs if they beat the Panthers next week. If they lose, though, that's where things get very interesting. In that scenario, I would have the Panthers getting the 4 seed with an 8-9 record, but even that would not be guaranteed, because while it seems likely that could happen, that would mean that the Panthers beat the Saints. All they would have to do then is beat the Saints and they would get in. So the Panthers control their own destiny, but if they lose that game, then Tampa Bay would get in with an 8-9 record unless they also lose week 18, and that would actually put the Carolina Panthers into the playoffs with a 7-10 record, interestingly enough. In fact, there's also the X factor, which is the Saints still do technically have a chance in their own right. What they would need to have happen is they would need to beat the Eagles next week, which is going to be a tall task, right? And the Eagles still do have something to play for, so the Saints were probably rooting for an Eagles victory last week to make this a little bit easier. But if they beat the Eagles and the Panthers beat the Buccaneers next week, then what they would need is to beat the Panthers the following week and the Buccaneers to lose in week 18. So they need 4 things to happen. Seems like a long shot, but hey, crazier things have happened. So as a whole, plenty of playoff scenarios, out here. In just the NFC alone, I have 5 teams that I don't have currently in a playoff spot that I think are legitimately, have a chance. Maybe New Orleans you don't count, I don't know, but you have 11 or 12 teams in the NFC that you're still saying, yeah, they could get in. I could totally see that happening. In the AFC, there's a little bit less, but there's still a few. There's still 3 or 4 teams there. So, we're talking about over half the league, well over half the league, has a chance to, is at least running the playoff machine at this point. Around 20 teams almost are still doing that. 2 weeks left in the season. So, been a very competitive year all around. Should be interesting to see how it goes. That's what I think. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.